So are these claims, as Tom Watson says, propaganda, not journalism, and not worth the paper they're written on? Well, Trevor Kavanagh is from The Sun, which first carried the story, and Alex Nunns has written a biography of Jeremy Corbyn and is a supporter of the Labour leader. Welcome to both of you. Trevor Kavanagh, the files show he was a person of interest, but was never a secret collaborator or an informer. This is a witch hunt.
Well, this is a typical shoot-the-messenger tactics, and it is richly sourced in the sense that we have spoken to and have documentary evidence that Jeremy Corbyn was seen as at the very least an asset, and he had a code name, COB, and that is documentary evidence. So the idea that this is not richly sourced is absurd. There is more to this than just the fact that he was seen, at least by the Czechoslovakian regime, as an asset. And that includes the fact that he took a tour of East Germany on a motorbike back in the 1970s.
Yeah, but that's very different, Trevor Kavanagh. I mean, being seen as a person of interest is nowhere near the same as being an informant or a spy, and therefore that has led to claims that you are running a smear campaign.
We have never said that Jeremy Corbyn was a spy. We've never said that he took money. What we are reporting is the view of Jan Sarkozy, who said that he paid him and that he met him at least 4 times, more than the one time that Jeremy Corbyn has admitted.
And is he credible, or is he a fantasist?
Well, I think that he's credible. He's got documentary evidence that shows that he...
Why do you think he's credible?
Well, because, as I say, there is documentary evidence that Jeremy Corbyn was seen by the Czechoslovakian STB as an asset and was codenamed COB on their files.
Right. I mean, Alex, at best, you could say Jeremy Corbyn was naive. He said he met a Czech diplomat and about other dealings he may have had in the 1980s. Isn't it in the public interest for newspapers to scrutinise his background?
Of course, but we're talking here about a story where there's a credible source on one side, the Czech Security Forces archive, and there's a person on the other side, Jan Sarkozy, the former Czech spy, who says he organised Live Aid. I mean, the other day he said he organised Live Aid. This guy has no credibility at all. He also says John McDonnell was passing high-level secrets to the Russians at a time when John McDonnell was working for Camden Borough Council. I mean, this guy, his credibility has been shredded. He's a fantasist. So for newspapers to report it, OK, perhaps it's legitimate to report it, but for the kind of continuous front-page barrage we've seen over the last half a week, there's just no justification in the source at all. Right.
I mean, Trevor Kavanagh, what information would a Labour backbencher on the periphery of the party be able to give the Czech Secret Service?
It's impossible to know, because the way that...
He didn't have any information to give them.
Let me finish the answer. The point is that spies don't work necessarily by just netting someone whole in a net. They add pieces of information together, dot by dot, until it forms a line. You don't know what you're giving the people you're talking to. Inadvertently, perhaps, but you don't know what dots you're providing to them, and it's best not to get involved with several meetings, formal meetings, by the way, which were annotated at the time, between a man who was clearly a spy for the Czechoslovakian regime and a member of parliament.
Do you think Jeremy Corbyn should be more open about his past meetings and dealings in the way that Theresa May has asked him to be, because it, at the very best, doesn't look good if there have been meetings with people from the opposite side during the Cold War?
Well, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, we're talking here about 1986. We're talking about the period of Glasnost and Perestroika, when the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc were opening up and trying to make connections and so on. We're talking about a period when, just 3 years earlier in 1983, the world had been on the brink of nuclear war, when there were mistakes on both sides, the Americans and the Russians. Surely having those kind of conversations across borders is important. Another point about this is we don't know why Jeremy Corbyn met this Czech diplomat, but at the time Jeremy Corbyn, I understand, was in touch with Czechoslovakian dissidents. He may have been meeting him to lobby on their behalf.
And Trevor Kavanagh, I mean, Tom Watson has strongly criticised your newspaper and others over this story. Well, he says newspaper proprietors in this country abuse their power. Is that true? You have run a story with evidence that is being conflicted here, certainly.
No,
Alex Nunns says it is.
None of it is being...
but
none of the evidence we've published has been contradicted.
Right. Well, do you contradict the evidence?
The lady from the Svetlana Potachnikova from the Czech Security Forces archives contradicts the spy. So we have a contradiction even in the sources here.
Maybe.
Right, what about well, you say maybe. And in that case, if there is a maybe, do you accept that there has been an abuse and there is an abuse of power by putting this story on front pages or making it very central news day after day after day?
Of course not, and I'm sure that you don't either, Joe.
But it's not what I think is irrelevant.
Of course it is. What is much more important, actually, than this, which was a fishing expedition by the Czechs, which picked up a fish of sorts, is much less important than what happened in East Germany when Jeremy Corbyn... I hope you're not going to shut me down at this point.
No.
Jeremy Corbyn and Diane Abbott took a motorcycle ride around East Germany back in the 1970s. Now, I've travelled widely in communist China and Soviet Russia ever since the 1970s. You did not go into those countries without good reason on behalf of the people who were hosting you. And they watched you and they monitored you every single step of the way from the moment you got up until the moment you went to bed.
What do you say?
He went on holiday with Diane Abbott.
How? Who could go on holiday like that on a boat?
This is what we're doing here, is we're just combining disparate random things from Jeremy Corbyn's past and trying to put them into this ridiculous story that Jeremy Corbyn was a paid informant, which is what's been reported. And there's no evidence that Jeremy Corbyn was a paid informant.
Alison Wolfe, is this a reasonable line of scrutiny?
I think it's perfectly reasonable for newspapers to print a very great deal of material. I want to, on that, I think it's really important that we have a free press and they will quite often print stories which are then shown to be inaccurate in some way or exaggerated, and the result of that is that people who follow them will end up with the correct conclusion. So I'm strongly against the idea that you should not publish material within the bounds of the law.
Turns out to be absolutely true.
Whether or not, in this particular case, I haven't got a clue, but I do suspect that a week from now, anybody who's following it in detail will be in a position to form some more informed view of what was going on. So I think the basic principle that the press should publish is absolutely of central importance. I actually want to make a different point, which is that in a strange way, whether or not this strengthens the position of Jeremy Corbyn or has the opposite effect, I do feel that a sort of slight sense of, I don't know about relief, but sort of slightly surprised that the issues to do with the Cold War are suddenly on the front pages again. Because one of the things that strikes me as a university teacher is the perhaps inevitable but terrifying extent to which people have forgotten any history that they only learned as history.
Right.
And I do think that the period of the Cold War was relevant, is relevant to where we are today, that it hasn't all gone away.
All right.
So this is completely separate from whether or not this story turns out to be extremely well-founded or extremely ill-founded. I think it's really quite a good idea that the country is being reminded of recent history.
Well, it certainly is. And on that, thank you both for coming in.
Big Man Tyrone here. Make sure to subscribe to the wicked awesome Robin Hood UKIP YouTube website. He exposes the leftist crops on the British brainwashing corporation. Nice.